Hey friends, it's Nikayla from the podcast Side Hustle Pro. I'm always looking for ways to keep my kids entertained without screens, and the Yoto Mini has been a total lifesaver. My kids are obsessed. Yoto is a screen-free audio player where kids just pop in a card and listen. Hours of stories, music, podcasts, and more, and no screens or ads. With hundreds of options for ages 0 to 12, it's the perfect gift they'll go back to again and again. Check it out at yotoplay.com. YOTOPLAY.com.
It was just after sunset on July.
Hey friends, it's Nikayla from the podcast Side Hustle Pro. I'm always looking for ways to keep my kids entertained without screens, and the Yoto Mini has been a total lifesaver. My kids are obsessed. Yoto is a screen-free audio player where kids just pop in a card and listen. Hours of stories, music, podcasts, and more, and no screens or ads. With hundreds of options for ages 0 to 12, it's the perfect gift they'll go back to again and again. Check it out at yotoplay.com. YOTOPLAY.com.
July the 26th, 1988, and Jimmy Rowland's pickup skids to a stop on a dirt road outside Childress, Texas. He and his wife Brenda jump out beneath the gnarled horse apple tree that stands by the road. Their hearts are in their throats. Hanging from a high branch is the limp body of their 17-year-old son, Tate Rowland, a rope around his neck. Moments earlier, Tate's friend, 15-year-old Chad Johnston, had burst into the Rowlands' house, shouting that Tate had just hanged himself. Now seeing Tate's body swaying against the dimming sky, Jimmy climbs onto the hood of Tate's truck and slices through the rope. Tate's lifeless form slumps into his father's arms. I'm Sarah Powell, and this is Obscurata, because some stories have no ending. Chad's story comes tumbling out in gasps. He claims he and Tate had been drinking beers near the tree, blowing off steam, when Tate suddenly tossed a rope over a high limb and joked about killing himself. Chad says he walked a few paces away, and when he turned back, to his horror, Tate was hanging from the tree. By 6 p.m, Chad had raced to alert Tate's parents, and now all three stare in shock at Tate's limp body. Brenda Rowland breaks into sobs. Jimmy, hand shaking, feels for a pulse that isn't there. Tate's face is pallid, his neck bearing the angry red furrow from the rope. Within the hour, sheriff's deputies arrive and begin piecing together the scene. Tate's death has every appearance of a suicide. He was a popular 17-year-old who did have personal troubles. Most knew he'd been despondent after a bad breakup with his high school girlfriend the year before. Still, on this day he'd shown no signs of depression or suicidal intent. He'd even made plans to help coach a softball game that evening. The suddenness of it all leaves everyone reeling. Deputies escort the distraught parents home, while others question Chad Johnston by the patrol car's headlights. The 15-year-old is oddly composed for a boy who's just seen his friend die. He repeats what he told the Rowlands. Tate just did it, with no warning. They were hanging out, and in the time it took Chad to toss an empty beer can aside, Tate had climbed the tree and hung himself. 2 days later, on July 28th, investigators bring Chad back in for a more formal interview. By now, a few details aren't adding up. For one, the coroner noticed Tate's neck had 2 distinct bruised lines, not one, suggesting the rope may have been applied twice. Under pressure, Chad's story shifts. He now claims that Tate tried to hang himself once earlier that evening, but the rope snapped under Tate's weight. Tate, according to Chad, then drove them back home to grab a stronger rope. The pair returned to the tree, and this time Tate strung up the new rope, climbed onto the hood of his truck, and jumped off to his death. It's a strange, almost unbelievable sequence, but it neatly explains the dual marks on Tate's neck. Chad insists he was paralysed by shock and fear, unable to stop his friend's actions. Despite the lingering suspicions, authorities find no hard evidence of foul play. The case that began and ended in the span of an hour is officially closed. Tate Rowland's death is ruled a suicide. In a small town like Childress, population barely 6,000, a tragedy of this scale hits like a gut punch. Tate's family, his father Jimmy and stepmother Brenda, his siblings, are left struggling to understand. Why would a kid who seemed okay that day suddenly take his own life? Rumours sprout almost immediately, but they're quiet, insular. Maybe it was an impulsive act, or a cry for help gone too far. In the hot July sun, the earth of Childress Cemetery is opened, and Tate is laid to rest. But the peace in Childress will prove short-lived. At Tate's funeral a few days later, several strange occurrences unsettled the mourners. An unknown woman dressed in black slipped into the chapel and left before anyone could speak to her, and a man in the front pew was heard whispering the word suicide over and over under his breath. These behaviours sent a chill through the congregation and sparked new murmurs around town. Soon after, a few of Tate's friends report an unsettling discovery near the site where he died. When police go out to investigate, they find a cow's skull wedged in the fork of the very tree where Tate had hung, with logs and stones arranged beneath it like a crude altar. The officers who find this bizarre scene can only speculate. Was it some kind of prank, or something more sinister? They remove the skull, but word of the altar spreads quickly. Within days, quiet grief gives way to fearful gossip. Neighbours trading stories at the diner or after church begin wondering if something evil was lurking behind Tate's death. By the time the new school year starts, in the autumn of 1988, while rumours have taken on a life of their own, whispers go around that Tate Rowland had been involved with a secret satanic cult, that he didn't really kill himself at all, but was murdered as part of a ritual. One popular story says that Tate had refused to kidnap a local child for a sacrifice, and the cult killed him for his betrayal. Fantastical as it sounds, many find it easier to believe than the idea that Tate died by his own hand. And there are signs, if one looks for them. Some townspeople swear they've seen strangers in dark clothes lurking near schoolyards, trying to befriend or pick up children. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed children especially. Potential victims, so the story says. the police department starts receiving daily phone calls from anonymous tipsters, insisting that Tate was murdered by a devil-worshipping ring in town. For law enforcement, it's as if a brushfire had ignited. They've never seen anything like this frenzy of accusations and fear. The late 1980s were the height of America's satanic panic, and Childress was no exception. People began seeing Satan's hand behind every strange occurrence. One local even sprayed 666 and upside-down crosses on the downtown wall, and the teenagers who blared heavy metal music were suddenly eyed as devil worshippers. Wild rumours circulated. Some claimed that shadowy cultists were sneaking into cemeteries to mutilate animals and deface tombstones. Reports spread of sinister strangers lurking around playgrounds, supposedly on the hunt for children to abduct for rituals. In this charged atmosphere, Tate Rowland's death quickly morphed from a family tragedy into a source of near hysteria for the community. The police, feeling the pressure, quietly reopened inquiries into the case. The district attorney convenes a special grand jury to hear any evidence of occult involvement. At a packed community meeting at the courthouse, a glossy pamphlet is handed out, the same one distributed by state authorities, detailing 30 ways to recognise satanic ritual abuse. This once quiet West Texas town is now seeing the spectre of the devil in its very midst. In early November 1988, yet another jolt hits the town rumour mill. 15-year-old Ray Wilkes, a local teenager who had been a classmate of Tate's, crashes a stolen car into a utility pole on a drunken joyride. Ray is roughed up but survives, and during the booking, as officers haul the swaying, intoxicated teen into the station, he begins to speak in a low, spooky voice. He claims that he's a member of the very satanic cult that the town has been whispering about, and that he was present at the tree when Tate died. The officers processing Ray exchange wary looks. Is this drunken nonsense, or a confession of something real? When he sobers up, Ray Wilkes recants everything, insisting he remembers nothing of that night and must have been babbling in a booze-fueled daze. Nevertheless, his eerie claims further stoke the fire. In the eyes of the townspeople, the Wilkes family, already known as a rowdy, troublemaking clan, now become prime suspects. Not long after, red graffiti appeared on the Wilkes' house reading, "I love the devil," which the family insisted was actually a defaced message about a girl named Letty, but few in Childress brought that explanation. Through 1989 and 1990, the panic in Childress simmers. The sheriff at the time refuses to officially reopen Tate's case. He publicly maintains that it was suicide and nothing more. But under the surface, investigations and grand jury interviews quietly continue. Meanwhile, Tate's family lives under a cloud of suspicion and dread. No one feels this more than Tate's older sister, Terrie Shawn Trosper. Terrie, 27 years old and a mother of 4, never believed for a second that Tate truly killed himself. Friends say she was hell-bent on proving someone murdered her little brother. In the 3 years after Tate's death, Terrie's once happy life falls apart. She separates from her husband, gives up custody of her young daughters, and begins keeping company with a rough crowd on the fringes of childress society. Eventually, Terrie starts dating Ricky Bradford, a 28-year-old ex-con with a violent reputation. Ricky happens to be best friends with Darwin Wilkes, one of the notorious Wilkes boys, and the older brother of Ray. Both Ricky and Darwin had served prison time for assault, and many who knew Terrie are alarmed to see her in their orbit. But Terrie seems unafraid. Some say she was even probing Ricky and his friends for information about Tate's death, determined to get to the truth by any means. On the morning of May 31st, 1991, 3 years after Tate's death, Terrie Trosper is found dead in a house on the outskirts of Childress. And not just any house. It's the home of Frank Wilkes, Ray and Darwin's father, a place locals had already dubbed the Devil House. Terrie had spent the previous night there, drinking heavily at a small gathering with Ricky Bradford, Darwin Wilkes, and a few others. Sometime in the early hours, Terrie passed out in a bedroom. By sunrise, she was cold to the touch, face down on the mattress and no longer breathing. Ricky Bradford later told police that when he went to check on Terrie and gently touched her back, she was cold and stiff, and he knew instantly that she was dead. There were no obvious stab wounds, no bullet holes, no blood. Just a lifeless young woman who'd been healthy the night before. Incredibly, given all the ominous build-up over the past 3 years, the initial investigation into Terrie's death is cursory. The same contract pathologist who handled Tate's case, Dr. Ralph Erdman, conducts a quick autopsy. He notes Terrie's blood alcohol was an astonishing 0.23, nearly 3 times the legal limit. There's vomit in her airway. Erdman concludes that Terrie choked on her own vomit in a drunken stupor. The coroner deems it a sad accident, and the Childress police, finding no obvious signs of foul play that morning, close the case as accidental death. But to those who knew Terrie, this explanation is outrageous. She never believed Tate took his own life, right up to her death. One friend later says, she was trying to find out who killed him. Now Terrie herself is gone under perplexing circumstances. Immediately, whispers arise connecting the 2 sibling deaths. Terrie was getting too close to the truth about the cult, some say, so they got her. In the days following Terrie's funeral, the rumours explode back to life in Childress, even more frenzied than before. Darwin Wilkes, the 22-year-old son of Frank and brother of Ray, is particularly distraught after Terrie's death. Some said that Darwin had been Terrie's lover. Others say Terrie confided to him about her investigation. Whatever the case, Darwin's behaviour becomes erratic. Just a week after Terrie's passing, Darwin Wilkes attempts to kill himself by swallowing a massive dose of Elavil, a potent prescription antidepressant. He's found barely alive and rushed to the hospital. As doctors pump Darwin's stomach, investigators searching his clothing discover a crumpled suicide note. "I know who killed Terrie. I can't live anymore." The note reads in Darwin's shaking handwriting. The implication is staggering. Darwin seems to know the murderer's identity. His attempt on his life suggests fear or guilt, or both. Darwin Wilkes survived the overdose, but when he regains consciousness, He tells police he remembers nothing about writing that note. He offers no names, no information, claiming he must have been out of his head and didn't mean what the note said. Not long after leaving the hospital, Darwin quietly skips town. He moves to Dallas, putting distance between himself and Childress, as if to start afresh and escape the swirling suspicions. It's a convenient exit that many find telling. Darwin's dramatic suicide attempt and note finally spur authorities to take decisive action. The new sheriff, Reese Bowen, who took office after the prior sheriff's tenure ended, reopens the investigations of both Tate Rowland's and Terrie Trosper's deaths in mid-1991. Childress's district attorney convenes another grand jury to hear all the explosive new evidence. At last, the cases are treated not as isolated incidents, but as potentially linked homicides. Investigators re-examine everything with fresh eyes. In July 1991, Tate's body was exhumed, though it was too decomposed to yield any definitive new clues. But one finding stood out. Traces of the sedative, Elavil, were detected in Tate's remains. This was the same drug that Terrie and Darwin had in their systems, a tranquilizer that could have been used to incapacitate Tate before his hanging. That discovery sent the local rumour mill into overdrive. In late October 1991, Terrie's body was also exhumed for a second autopsy. This time, the results were damning. The examination showed that Terrie had been smothered to death, with contusions on her thigh and bruising in her mouth, indicating a violent struggle. And just like her brother, Terrie had traces of Elavil in her system at the time of her death. There was now no doubt Terrie had been murdered. The two siblings' fates, it seemed, were intertwined in darkness. When this autopsy information became public, it validated what many in Childress had long feared. The whispers about occult sacrifice no longer seemed far-fetched. Some locals outright claimed Tate's hanging had been a ritual killing, attended by a crowd of cloaked observers. Stories of midnight bonfires, robed figures skulking on back roads, and secret gatherings in abandoned farmhouses flood the gossip channels. So intense is the fervour that even the Texas Department of Public Safety takes notice. The state police agency circulates a memo to local law enforcement statewide, warning them how to identify signs of occult ritual crime. Childress, in the eyes of many, has become ground zero for satanic evil. Under this renewed scrutiny, law enforcement zeroes in on suspects. Suspicion has long swirled around Ricky Bradford and the Wilkes brothers. They were, after all, the last ones to see Terrie alive. In early 1992, a breakthrough comes. Frank Wilkes, patriarch of the Wilkes family, and his son Darwin walk into the sheriff's office and implicate Ricky Bradford in Terrie's murder. They claim that Ricky blurted out a confession to them, bragging that he killed the Terrie one night after heavy drinking. That was enough for the sheriff to obtain an arrest warrant, and Ricky Bradford was taken into custody for Terrie's murder that same day. In July 1992, Ricky Bradford stands trial for the murder of Terrie Trosper. The proceedings grip the town. The most powerful evidence comes from a young woman named Betty Lewis, who had been at the Wilkes' house the night Terrie died. Taking the stand with a shaking voice, Betty testifies that she awoke in the middle of that night to see Ricky Bradford pressing a pillow over Terrie's face, smothering her. She describes Terrie's legs kicking and her arms flaying before Terrie went still. The courtroom gasps at this chilling testimony. Ricky's defense attorneys attack Betty's credibility. They hint that her memory is hazy and even play a muffled tape where Betty allegedly denied seeing anything suspicious. But the jury finds Betty's sworn account convincing. On November the 3rd, 1992, after years of rumours and dread, a jury convicts Ricky Bradford of Terrie Trosper's murder. He is sentenced to life in prison. For the first time, it seems someone will pay a price for the dark events that have haunted Childress.
Hey friends, it's Nikayla from the podcast Side Hustle Pro. I'm always looking for ways to keep my kids entertained without screens, and the Yoto Mini has been a total lifesaver. My kids are obsessed. Yoto is a screen-free audio player where kids just pop in a card and listen. Hours of stories, music, podcasts, and more, and no screens or ads. With hundreds of options for ages 0 to 12, it's the perfect gift they'll go back to again and again. Check it out at yotoplay.com. YOTOPLAY.com.
With Bradford behind bars, Childress finally breathed a sigh of relief. The terrifying saga seemed to be over. Yet not everyone was satisfied that the whole truth had been revealed. No one else was ever charged in connection with Tate Rowland's death, and some in town continued to whisper that a wider conspiracy had been covered up. To this day, the tale of Tate and Terrie remains a haunting memory in Childress, a cautionary tale of how fear and hysteria can consume a community. Were the siblings really victims of a satanic cult? Or did ordinary human violence get amplified by the era's panic? In the end, the answer may never be fully known, but the dark legend of their deaths endures, a chilling echo of the 1980s satanic panic that once gripped this small Texas town. And that's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/The Whispering Woods, clicking on Obscurata, and for £2.50 a month you can listen ad-free. You can also subscribe to the Banshee tier, where you can listen to this podcast and our other podcast, The Whispering Woods, ad-free, and that is £4.50 a month. We are also on Apple Premium, where for $4.99 a month you can listen ad-free to both podcasts. I want to say a quick thank you to Rog for fact-checking and editing. And as always, stay curious and sleep with the lights on, just in case.
Hey friends, it's Nikayla from the podcast Side Hustle Pro. I'm always looking for ways to keep my kids entertained without screens, and the Yoto Mini has been a total lifesaver. My kids are obsessed. Yoto is a screen-free audio player where kids just pop in a card and listen. Hours of stories, music, podcasts, and more, and no screens or ads. With hundreds of options for ages 0 to 12, it's the perfect gift they'll go back to again and again. Check it out at yotoplay.com. YOTOPLAY.com.